Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are at. And I am Todd DeVoe, and I have been involved in responding to emergencies and disasters for, since 1989. And then around 1999, I started my journey in the field of emergency management while I was working in EMS, one of the nation's most active counties. And then from there, I moved into medical logistics. And the story has since been told. So today, we are going to be discussing the idea of leadership and developing your team from remote, right? And I said we're all kind of experienced at this point now with working remotely, working with teams remotely, since COVID. And this is now becoming something that, it's not just because of COVID any longer. Now it is something that we have to do. And one of the most important things we have to think about as far as remote teams is fostering communications and fostering teams and fostering the idea of the workforce. Because as humans, we like to really interact with each other. So that's one part of it. So it's important to really create and foster real connections. See, creating authentic and interpersonal connections is a big challenge as we're just dispersed all over the world and the nation, and so it's too easy for us to forget that we have people out there working in other locations, right? And so that's one of the things we have to do as business continuity managers is really consider what do we have to do to create this team. So consider creating a team and rituals like you normally would have if you were inside the office, right? And this is what we're going to get into today. There's a few companies with more than half their workforce works globally and remotely. So this is, like I said, this is something that we've been dealing with for a few years now. For those of us that have been working internationally, we have people working in other nations and all the time. But how do we bring this into one team, especially when you're thinking about global pandemics, global responses, global emergencies, right? And this is why we really need to be working in that idea of creating that global, that remote leadership. So that's the important part here. And this is what we need to be getting into. Also, we really need to establish who we are, right? And so we need to create ways to meet in person if we can, or at least have those Zoom meetings and make people have their video on so you can kind of see their face. And this really helps spread the idea of team, the idea of working together. So now that being said, what do? Right? How do you make this work? So your leadership, your remote leadership, that is, has to be working together, right? And has to be working in congruence with your mission and your statement. We've been going through this idea of that, what the mission is, what the why is of the company, and really how this works, right? So while a single offsite site might work for some people, right? You got some companies such as we talked about this before. The companies that are so remote that we have, facilities not just only in the United States, but you have facilities that are in foreign offshore nations, and then some are moving around all the time. If you think about filming, production, they're offsite mostly, right? They're more offsite than they are on site. And so, how do you communicate with them during disasters? How do you communicate with them during a crisis? So that's that's critical. So communications, realistically, is your most critical point of your system. So building that up there, building the relationship that you have with your leaders when they're out in different locations, how do you communicate with them? So establishing a communications plan is simple. Well, maybe it's not simple, right? It sounds simple on paper, right? So having devices that you can use during crisis is critical, right? Now, I'm going to have to tell you, this is sponsored by Titan HST, so I'm going to pitch Titan HST here for a second. Having the device so it's simple to use. I am not a Luddite by any means. Well, maybe I am. But the ability to be able to push a single button to be able to communicate with people that way, I think is critical for me. And so when I started using Titan as an end user, when I was at a university. It was so easy for me to use. And that's, I've told the story before. This is why when I had the opportunity to come work for Titan HST, I took that opportunity, right? Because it's such an easy communications device. And when you're looking at the ability for everybody to get on one platform, right? Whether you're an Android user, an Apple user, or whatever, using that one device, this is what you need to look for when you're looking for a communications device, right? Now, we are used to this now, right? This is something that's not off the charts, right? We have Zoom meetings, okay? We have GoToMeeting, we have Google Meet, right? All these devices that we have, we can go in there and click on and use. So having the having the ability and having the knowledge and having that wherewithal to be able to bring your teams together during a crisis is critical. I think at the end of the day, when we start looking at the idea of the communications aspect of things, we need to allocate the budget and the resources. And this is one of the things that we need to do when we start managing up, as we talked about last week. Managing up is being able to get those resources for your team members, right, and for your leadership team to be able to do their job during a crisis, right? Now, when we say, "Oh, when will a crisis happen?" Well, we just lived through one, right? We're still living through it. Since 19, since 2019, we've been really dealing with the COVID. 2020 was the year that never ended, and then now we're moving to 2021 with the ability or with the probability of having another crisis this fall. Of course, here in California, our storms with firestorms. We had the storms of the Pacific in the Atlantic as well coming in here, grabbing into the southeast, right? So yeah, we're gonna have these crises, right? It's not going to stop, and I think this is the time now as business continuity managers where we can really take this information and tell our management above us, saying, "Look, we need to put time and money into this program." Right? It's no longer can business continuity and emergency management be a nice to have. It's a have to have, right? We have schools and universities that had to learn on the fly to be able to teach online and to be able to do things that were outside of their traditional box of education. And now that they're learning how to do this, right, you're going to learn how to manage this. So while I've cite some companies feel like we're going to put some people off site and the majority are coming into the office, I think we're seeing a flip on this now where you're having more and more people go remote, right? And how do you manage those teams that are remote, and how do you put leadership into that remote area is very critical. Now, software is important, right? And technology is important. But however, you can have way too much software and technology on top of you as well. And so we really need to, like, instead of expanding the amount of software and tools that you're using, you need to find devices and tools that can really shrink that footprint that you have, that digital footprint, if you will, right? Put this into one or two devices that you can really use easily, right? And everybody knows to go to. I mean, there's been a few times, and it just happened to me the other day, right? I had a meeting that I had set up. I thought that it was going to be a phone call meeting. They thought we're jumping on to a Google Meet, and we cross communicated and we didn't talk to each other. And we had to reschedule that meeting because there's so much stuff going out there. So being able to pare that down into maybe one device, it would be critical for you to do so, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we have to stop learning. Smart leaders are learning software to save time and build better teams and manage them more effectively. And so one of advantage of having this is the ability to have those remote teams and to be able to communicate on a regular basis. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at different software, right? It means that we should really be tuning that down into one or two different pieces of software that your entire team is using, especially when you're doing your remote teams. Also, the other thing that we could be looking at too is the use of artificial intelligence and AI and augmented reality in managing that team and monitoring the team as well. And that's one of the things that I really am excited about with the Internet of Things, 5G coming up, things like this, where we could really help that to manage our team, the remote team, and being able to keep people in mind when disasters are occurring for quick communication. One of the things I love about the Titan app as well is the ability to do quick check-ins. Right? Are you safe? Not safe? If you're not safe, what do you need? Really, just one click of the button. And communicating up with the crisis leadership team, and then the crisis leadership team is able to communicate back to the members that are having issues, right? And whether it's they're physically hurt or whether they just can't move because of the lack of infrastructure that allows us to move, the system needs to be able to communicate both ways, right? So you know what's going on, so you know what's going on with your team, and you can effectively help them out. We again, we talk about California here. We have those wildland fires all the time, and last year we had one in Orange County that really got close to the built environment, right, to the urban environment. I know of one company that actually had everybody come from their homes because they were displaced, and they were able to go to one location, check everybody in to make sure that they're okay. But they had to use this phone tree system. How ineffective was that, right? Now, thank God everybody was okay during this fire, but it was very ineffective of knowing where their team was. Having that single device is critical to be able to manage those teams. And you need to have that solution, right? You need to have that solution to make you a better team leader and to help your team communicate with you. And I think that's one of those things that we really need to be putting time and effort into. So we have to really address the human side of the remote team leadership, right? And I think this is what we forget about a lot is when we start looking at what it is to be on a remote team. It's still a team, right? It's still people. It's not cogs in the machine, right? It's not computers and laptops and smart devices that you're communicating with. There's a human being on the other side of that job, and really need to take their life and what they're doing into consideration when we're looking at how we're communicating with them as well. Software again takes the burden off the managers. It also helps identify blind spots when you're communicating with distributed teams, right? But again, we don't want to be leaning all 100% on a whole bunch of different software. We want to pare that down. A great leader and a great company invests time and energy into continually training and develop their team. And this is no different with your distributed team working. Learning and development is not just another perk or benefit. It's an investment in building a great team and a talented workforce. So the challenge with a distributed workforce, especially one that is global, is making sure that you meet the unique needs and the learning styles of each of your workers, right? And making sure that the software, making sure that the platform that you're using is really easy to use. And this is why you should also be looking for a communication device that has a learning management system built into it. And I think that you will be able to get everybody on the same page because that is critical during a crisis, right? Now, other thing that I want to kind of stress here is companies and leaders should embrace this dynamic of communication, right? And it's a big reason why you people can work remotely, right? When we lead a distributed team, focus on those metrics that matter instead of worried about someone's work focus, objectives, and outcomes of behavior. Working on communication will help bring all those things together, and that way they don't feel that they're left off on their own devices, right? It's almost like you're back in the office again with your regular check-ins, your regular meetings, and also with those KPIs that are set for them when it comes to leadership. At the end of the day, right? Don't forget to focus about your culture and creating and maintaining that culture of preparedness amongst your organization and amongst your community and amongst your business, because the culture preparedness at the end of the day, right, is going to really help your leaders in business continuity and emergency management be able to lead their teams during that crisis, right? Just because that they're off living or working from home or from remote locations, right, and they're not all on one building, you really need to still instill the idea of preparing for disasters, preparing for crisis, as if you would if they were in the building with you. We talk about that happening on 9/11 before, where you had Morgan Stanley, where they had the culture preparedness instilled in them, and it saved thousands of lives because of this, right? And just because people are not working in the same building does not mean that you can't have that same impact when you're looking at preparedness. Again, let's take a look at what happened with uh, what happened with the fires in Irvine, right, where the company came together with the culture preparedness, and it was able to actually help everybody. Although they still needed some help on the communication side of things. So if you instill that culture of preparedness into your team, have it part of your team meetings, have it part of the one-on-ones, offsite and also on-site, right? Ensure that remote team members are aware of the company's plans and the company's ability to help them during that crisis as well. And lastly, stay aware of your company's mission and values when you're doing this, right? And instill that into your team as well. Because yes, even though we're not all in the same building, we still have the one mission, the one values. And again, please stress the idea of the culture of preparedness. Hey, everybody, it was great having you here today with me this morning. And I really do appreciate your time that you spend with me. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and LinkedIn. And hey, don't forget, for your communications needs, reach out to Titan HST. Until next time, stay safe and stay hydrated.